Welcome to test, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so I figured I'd do one more game before I cut in for the night. It is 9:24 p.m. here, so it would be Magandang Hapon to my people in the Philippines, because it would be 11:25 a.m. getting into lunchtime over there. So I got you one for your lunch break, pretty much. But I have the game Jordan van Foreest versus Wesley. Yeah, it's a pretty nice one. It's a nice little thing. It has a very interesting kind of concept that I talk about sometimes. So I got a kind of like a little puzzler for you real quick. But as you guys see, I changed my layout. I was having too many people ask me who was white and who was black. As everybody pretty much knows, the person on the left is white, the person on the right is black. And I had a little chess piece next to him, and I also have a chess piece on the thumbnail. So, I mean, it's not really a question, I didn't think, because I just kind of overkilled who was white and who was black. So what I did was I actually moved the chess piece, and I made it severely larger, and it's right next to the chessboard. So I really don't feel like anybody's going to ask me again who's white and who's black. I mean, honestly, if somebody does, I'm just not going to answer it because I don't really have time. I shouldn't have that many people asking me that. So anyway, that hopefully is solved. Like I said, if somebody asks me that in the future, I'm just gonna like ignore the comment. I'm not even gonna answer that because it's just like, I mean, if somebody out there that's a subscriber, they want to take the time to answer that question, go ahead, but I'm just not gonna waste time on it. This should cancel that out completely. Anyway, if I have anybody that is from the Netherlands, I will say hallo, which to say hello in Dutch is the same as in Norwegian, so it didn't really take a lot of learning. Thank you is dank je. Dank je. I don't really know how to say that for sure, but it is a West Germanic language, so it does kind of sound like thank you, dank you, something like that. It has very similar roots to English, and so in German, so I mean, it's going to sound very similar. Anyway, magandang hapon to my people in the Philippines. It is afternoon there. Aking mga kaibigan, kamusta, mabuhay, and ingat lagi to you. Appreciate you guys stopping by. So if you guys are ready to go, let's go ahead and take a look and see what we got for this game. All right, so we got E4. Pop this up. I always remember, but sometimes I forget. We got E4. We got E5, knight to F3, knight to C6. Pretty much almost always, you're gonna see it look like this when you come out of the opening with E4. D4. Pawn takes D4, knight takes D4, and so we have the Scotch game right here. And then knight to F6 is the Schmidt variation. Now, we have bishop to B5. Now, something I will say about this particular move is it's been played 3 times. And the really interesting thing about the situation of it being played 3 times is that none of those times white won. Out of 6 moves, this is the only move that has never won, ever. And it's been played like thousands of times, like maybe 10,000 times almost. Like pretty much this position here has been played 10,000 times with 6 different moves. And this move has never won, not one time. It's drawn once, and it's won for black twice. So anyway, this early in the video, if you guys do want to stop the video, and it's not really a trick question I have for you guys, but it's just kind of like something that I think might kind of go against something I normally say. So like I said, if you want to go ahead and stop the video real quick and see what the move is for black, go ahead and do so real quick. Okay, cool. So for a lot of you guys out there that actually watch my videos, that have been watching my videos for a long time, you guys always hear me talk about when you're in some similar kind of types of positions like this, like Ruy Lopez's, things like that. You don't want to take this pawn on E4. It's a trap. You're seeing castling coming up. You're seeing D4 coming up, opening a position up. And it's like usually not the greatest thing, right? Okay. This time it is. It is actually, it's like I said, it's interesting because bishop to B5 has been played 3 times. It is not a good move. This is not a good opening for white. Like, I can just clearly say that this is like a really dubious opening for white. Because it's just like, I mean, with best play, black should be able to get a really strong advantage and should be able to go to win the game. And like I said, that is what's happened 3 times out of the thousands of times when this, the 3 times this has been played. Anyway, So basically, if you did think of knight takes e4 and you committed to that move, you would be absolutely correct. If we take the pawn here, just to run through a few moves, you will see that this is a very legitimate capture and it literally just loses a pawn out of the opening. It's kind of like a gambit. So we would see bishop takes c6, pawn takes c6, castles by white, c5 by black, knight to b5 by white, bishop to e6, queen to f3, knight back to d6, rook to d1, queen to d7, and we would see knight 1 to c3. And as you guys can see, we basically just followed best lines for both sides. You know, black is just up a pawn. I mean, it's just literally a free pawn. There's no type of trickery that's involved in the situation. You know, it just gives away the pawn. I mean, as you can see, black, basically, I mean, they're going to be castling. So if you just put that on the board, you know, you're castling. Probably not in this particular situation. You probably want to take here first. But I mean, it's pretty easy to defend. You know, this square here, you can move rook over if you want to. Probably it's going to be something like this. And then after takes with check, you're going to be looking at something like this. And then after castles, you're all good to go. Yes, you do have a double pawn, but you do have an extra pawn. So like I said, it's almost a pawn's worth advantage. And that is a very legitimate capture that you would have done. And like I said, for those of you that actually watch my stuff, like I said, normally it is kind of like a trap situation. You don't really want to go for that. But this was not one of the cases. And this is why out of 3 times it's been played, it's never won. Because like I said, officially it is dubious. So I'm on record saying that. Okay, bishop to b5, but we do see bishop to c5, which has been played quite a few times after bishop to b5 is played, because I think a lot of people mentally are thinking, yeah, there's probably something wrong with taking this pawn. But like I just said a second ago, there is zero problem with taking that pawn. It is just a free pawn. You know, you don't have to worry about queen coming in here and pinning the knight because you can unpin with the queen. You're good to go. So we see knight back to b3. Bishop comes back to b6. We have knight to c3. And as you can see, you know, now white has basically like, you know, equalized the position, you know, when they did kind of give away a pawn, you know, earlier in the thing. So they're protecting their pieces and they're good to go now. So d6 comes, we see castles by white. We see bishop to g4 by black. Queen comes to d3. We have castles by black. Bishop takes c6. Pawn takes c6, and we have a4. So it's looking pretty good for white now in this situation because, you know, we have like a weak pawn here. You know, this bishop is a little oddly placed. It's going to get kicked away. This bishop is starting to get under attack. So we see a5 to protect against that. We see bishop to g5. We got h6, pawn, bishop to h4. We have g5. We have bishop to g3. Now, there are kind of a lot of pieces on the queen side of the board, so you're not really super worried about like weakening your king as much in this position because there isn't a lot of pieces that kind of come over and force an attack. Plus you have the knight, you have the queen, you have the bishop that can kind of defend a little bit. So, you know, each different individual situation is different. Everything is not the same. So we have knight coming to h5. The knight comes to d4. We got bishop back to d7, protecting that pawn because, you know, we do have this knight, you know, messing with it here. Rook a to d1, and we see queen to f6. Now, it might seem like everything is pretty secure, so you can go ahead and take this bishop here. But like I always telling you guys before, do not go into auto trades because sometimes it could benefit black, or it could benefit the other player more than it will benefit you when you're going into those types of trades. So instead of queen to f6, if we did see knight taking here, we would see pawn taking g3. And it wouldn't be that bad of a situation because, yeah, you did kind of open up and put yourself in the pin, but you're just going to sidestep that very quickly. And some of the major benefits you have is the fact that this structure, even though you have doubled pawns, it's actually pretty good in the defense of the king because it's really hard to crack, and you do have an open file for your rook. So the thing about it is when you're thinking about doubling your pawns and stuff like that, you know, capturing away from the center, capturing into the center, things like that, those are general rules, and you have to kind of make your own decisions. Each and every different position is different. Yes, generally you do want to capture towards the center, but if you did, you would end up with this position, and now black has the ability to try to take advantage of this file by maybe moving the king down and moving the rook over. So this isn't the best scenario that you want with your pieces. This position here is much better because if the black tried to do that, you can just move h3 and you have like a nice structure here. So, I mean, you know, chess gets very deep. Chess definitely gets very deep. So, like I said, queen to f6. We see pawn to e5. Pawn to e5 is a mistake. You know, it's just like flat out a mistake. It just gives away a pawn. And you'll see that this pawn is, you know, becomes relevant later. pawn taking e5, and it's just kind of like, yeah, just gift me the pawn. As Yasser Sarah once says, gift me the pawn. Knight comes to e4, kind of like a little intermezzo move, and so we see queen to g7. Now, something that would have been actually a lot more forceful, a little bit stronger for black, would have been actually going to queen to e7. And then after we see knight to f3, we see bishop to f5, and we're not worrying about the capture of the pawn here because we have g4. So that's going to be forcing the knight away, and so that's very unfortunate, because even though you're coming back here, defending this, you're going to be dropping this bishop. That's not what you want to do. So queen came to g7. So after knight came to f3, bishop to e6, we did see the bishop attack the queen now with tempo after taking that pawn back. So now we're equal and everything. So we have f6, and then we see knight back to g3. And this really kind of isn't an in-betweener, because it actually puts white, you'll see in the next couple moves, it actually kind of puts white in a bad spot. So just to run through those moves real quick, we see pawn taking e5, knight taking h5, we see queen to f7, but then after you rescue the knight from hanging, you run into bishop to c4. And this is actually what we saw in the game. And so as you can see, this is a huge problem, because now you're about to drop the exchange, because you have to move the queen out of the way. So something that would have actually been just like slightly better in this position after f6 is actually retreating the bishop to d4. And then you're not worried about rook f to d8, because you can just sidestep the queen over and you're unpinned, and you are putting a lot of pressure on this pawn here. So that would have just been a little bit better here. So like I said, we did see bishop to c4. Queen came to e4. Bishop took on f1. We saw rook taking f1. Rook a to e8. We see h4. Yeah. Pawn taking h4. Knight taking h4. And then now we're giving a pawn away. Pawn takes f2 with check. You don't really have anything you can do. You kind of have to move away because, you're threatened. You're going to just be getting checked on f2. So we don't want that. But as you can see, black has 5 pawns, white has 4. So, I mean, like I said, that pawn has become relevant later on. So now we have rook to e6, queen to g4 with check. We see king down to h7, knight to h5. So it kind of looks like white might be kind of like doing a little something here, but rook to g8 just says, hey, we're not doing any of that. I have 2 rooks and you have 1. So, I mean, my strength is better than your strength. Queen comes to e2. We see rook to f8. We got queen back to g4. So hoping maybe we can repeat. But Wesley Self says, no, I'm super winning. We're not repeating anything. We're just going to go ahead and let me win. Queen comes to g8. We got queen to e4 with check. We have king to h8. We got g3, queen to g5. We got queen to e2. Rook to d6. We got king to g2. Knight d to f6. We got king to h3. We got bishop takes g3. Knight takes g3. Rook takes f1. Knight takes f1. We got rook to f4. Knight to f3. Queen to g4 with check. King to h2. And then queen takes f3. And as you can see, the material is just like really, really imbalanced. We got a rook and a queen against a rook and a knight. It's really not fair. And we also have 2 extra pawns. So as if the material imbalance wasn't already bad enough, now we have 2 extra pawns. And they are 2 completely passed pawns, at that. So the queen takes e5 with check. King comes to h7. We got knight to g3. We got rook to h4. King to g1. We got rook to g4. So this is kind of... This kind of sucks, like this position that you're in here, because now this horse is like I'm sad, I need some type of love or something. This is not nice. So king comes back to h2. We see rook back to g7. We got b4, which I mean has a legitimate idea behind it. You're trying to create a pass pawn and get your pawn down the board. It's kind of a dream though, but I mean it is what it is. Pawn takes b4. We see a5, c5, a6, c4, a7. b3, pawn takes b3, pawn takes b3. We have queen to e1 because now we're looking at some really bad threats of just queening this pawn. We see b2, queen to b1 with check, but we just block with the rook. Queen comes to e1. We got b1 equals queen. We have a8 equals queen. So we have 4 queens, and if I'm not mistaken, I know it was a Tigran Petrosian game. I think it might have been Bobby Fischer versus Tigran Petrosian, the famous 4 queens game. This is literally what that looks like. It's a bunch of queens, man. I remember one time I had 5 queens against somebody, and they had just had a king, and I was just being funny, man. I was like, dude, resign, bro. What are you doing? Anyway, queen came to c2 with check, and this is just mating. king goes to h3, queen c to g2 with check, and pick your mate. You know, basically, I mean, what do you want to do? Move the king up here. You got checkmate here. Move the king up. If you want to be funny, you say, hey, I got, you know, because you got this dumb knight right here. Let me go ahead and go queen f4, king up, and then checkmate. Or king up, checkmate. I mean, literally, the king can only go here. So, I mean, you have all kinds. You got this mate, too. I mean, you know, if you want to be extra super funny, you can just be like, I'm going to take your queen over here and just liquidate a queen off the board. You can't perpetual check me because you don't have any checks here. All kinds of fun stuff, man. When you're winning and you're mating, you can pretty much pick whatever you want to do. So, I will say to my people in the Netherlands, dank G. Appreciate you coming and stopping by. You know, Mariming Salamat Po. You know, everybody that is in the Philippines. Appreciate you stopping by, and I will see you guys next time.